Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and we are continuing our transfer portal series today with what is probably the most exhausting transfer portal haul to talk about. That is Lane Kiffin's LSU Tigers portal class. Now, when Brian Kelly was fired, there was the whole head coaching search saga with Lane. Will he stay at Ole Miss? Will he go to Florida? But he ends up at LSU with the Tigers. There were 33 players who transferred out. Makes sense. Coaching regime change. That sort of attrition makes sense. Then he brought in 40 players. And it wasn't just 40 players, it was 40 incredibly high level players, some of the best players in the transfer portal class this past year. So let's get right into it. Let's start with who left the program. And one of the notable guys who left was Michael Van Buren. He was LSU's backup quarterback. He was behind Garrett Nussmeier all of last year. And you saw him come in late in the year when Nussmeier was banged up. I did think there was a chance that Lane might have stuck with Van Buren for this year, right? Because he has that dual threat ability. He is mobile enough. We know that Lane likes those quarterbacks who can also move. I thought that Van Buren had the tools to where maybe Lane would ride with him for the first year. But it seems like with the amount of money that Lane has access to here to build this roster, and really like how this first year is probably like semifinals or bust for the Tigers, he decided to move off Van Buren and go for a bigger fish in the portal, which we'll get to. Then there were two people on the offensive line that left that I want to talk about. The first off is DJ Chester. He was the center for LSU. He was a younger, really talented guy. And the second one is Carius Kern. He actually went to Ole Miss. Did Kern. So he did the reverse Lane Kiffin follow. He went back. He went to Oxford when Lane left Oxford. But both Chester and Carius Kern, they're very, they're kind of raw talent on the offensive line, but they're both incredibly talented. They're both very high rated. So that is a position that's going to need to be addressed by Lane in whether it was in the portal here or throughout the offseason. And another guy who left LSU who I think matters more than it might seem on the surface is Nick Anderson. Now, I talked about Nick Anderson in my Kentucky portal video because that's where he ended up. But Anderson was ultra productive when he was healthy in his first year at Oklahoma. Tons of yards, tons of catches, tons of TDs, really dynamic guy downfield. Then he missed all of 2024 with the Sooners, only played in a few games this last year with the LSU Tigers because of injury. I think he's going to be really good, and he, as a receiver, he's a guy who you really miss unless you do what Lane did, pulling your receiver. So let's get into who they brought in. Starting off with the quarterback Sam Levitt, they brought him in from Arizona State. He was injured for a good chunk of last season, but obviously he was ASU's quarterback during that playoff run 2 years ago when they won the Big 12 and almost beat Texas in the Peach Bowl. I'm not the highest on Sam Levitt. And it's not even just because he's missing most of, if not all of spring, which is also incredibly concerning for me. But that's not what this video is for. I'll get into my Sam Levitt stuff later on. But Levitt obviously is brought in to be the quarterback of this team. They also did bring in Hussein Longstreet, the former five-star guy from USC. But Levitt is the guy. We'll see how it plays out. I'll get into why I don't think it's the best situation later on in the summer. But moving on to the second highest guy they brought in, or maybe it was Jordan Seaton. I forget. But we're talking about Prince Will Umamielen here. He is the highest rated guy from Ole Miss to follow Lane to Baton Rouge. He had 9 sacks last year. His older brother, Princely Umamielen, was also a great edge rusher in the SEC. Prince Will is following in those footsteps. Ultra productive guy coming off the edge. Obviously familiar with Lane. Now he gets to play under Blake Baker in that scheme. I'm excited to see how that plays out. Then I just said his name, but Jordan Seaton, the former 5-star offensive tackle, he is transferring in from Colorado. And just watching the tape on Seaton, you can clearly see how dominant of an athlete that he is. He's bigger than everybody. He's almost faster than everybody too. So getting a player like Seaton, who's as highly rated, as highly touted as he was in the portal, is obviously a big get for Lane. And then also on the lines, Jordan Ross, the edge rusher from Tennessee, he's 6'5", 245, so he really is an unbelievable presence coming off the edge. He's a total freak athlete in that production. You didn't see a whole ton of production for him at Tennessee, but that's good, something that's going to come with experience, and I believe that Jordan Ross, paired with Prince Will Umamielen, coming off of both edges, with Blake Baker calling the defense, that's going to be really, really scary for offenses this fall. Moving on to some of this haul on offense. Trey Wilson, the receiver coming in from Florida. I'm going to address some of the receivers that they brought in here right now in this little run. But Trey Wilson is a great rack guy, and he was always effective when he was healthy with the Gators. Now, that's kind of the asterisk. He was banged up a lot. Now, is that a pattern with him, or was it just a string of bad luck? We don't know. But he has over 1,000 yards through his career, really shifty route runner. He came on immediately as a freshman and looked awesome. And then in those stints where he has been healthy the past 2 years, he was looking like that guy. So as long as he can stay healthy, he'll be a massive help in this room. But another receiver that Lane brought in is Jace Brown, coming over from Kansas State. He has over 700 catches over the past 2 seasons, as well as 40-plus grabs and 5 touchdowns individually in each of those past 2 years as well. So he's a little bit bigger than Trey. He's not really like this massive out wide downfield threat, but he is more of that bigger bodied presence for Ole Miss, for LSU's passing game. Another receiver they brought in, Winston Watkins Jr. from Ole Miss, another guy who followed Lane from Oxford. He looked really, really good as a freshman. 26 catches, almost 400 yards, and a touchdown in his first year in college. I'm really excited about his ceiling and what he can do in Lane's offense here in Baton Rouge. Back to defense here. Stephon Green from Clemson on the defensive line. Now, he's going to be an interior D lineman. He's 6'4", 290. He had 2.5 sacks last year with the Tigers as a true sophomore. This is a guy who you've either got to go learn from about yourself, see what I say about him over the summer because I'm very high on him, or else you'll have to learn about him when he's terrorizing your team this fall when you're playing against LSU. Green is going to be a mammoth on the inside, if not because of purely how good he is. It's because of what I talked about with Jordan Ross and Umamiyelan coming off the edges. That's going to take so much attention. So then Green, he can be a good pass rusher up the middle. He'll also just be a great run stopper there. Stephon Green is a guy who I'm really excited about, and so is Malik Blockton, another interior D lineman coming over from Auburn. He's an elite transfer, another one of these really highly rated blue chip guys who are transferring out of Auburn with that coaching change. Really highly rated young guy. Like I said, he's shown his flashes, 2 sacks and a fumble recovery during his limited time on the field with the Tigers. I'm very excited about him. And another guy who came over with Lane from Ole Miss is TJ Daugherty at linebacker. He's a very productive linebacker. Had over 174 tackles, 3.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles in his 2 years with the Rebels. So TJ is an incredibly productive player, just always say nose for the football. You need that guy at your second level if you want to have an elite defense. But just highlighting a few other guys who came in. I discussed Hussein Longstreet, the 5-star guy from USC. He'll be behind Sam Leavitt this year as long as Leavitt can play. But also a guy like Jalen Brown off the edge from South Carolina. Achilles Woods, an edge from South Alabama. His first name is Achilles, which is pretty cool, but I think he's also just going to be a really good player. They brought in Trey Brown, a receiver from Old Dominion. He is more of a big-bodied guy. So he's getting less flash because of where he came from. But Trey Brown, coming from Old Dominion, he's a guy who could see the field pretty early. And then Ty Benefield, a safety from Boise State, he's getting tons of hype so far through the spring. So just to summarize this class from Lane Kiffin and the LSU Tigers, it is nuts. The volume, but paired with the quality of player that they brought in, is just crazy. 10 receivers transferred in total. I've mentioned, I think, 3 or 4 of them, but they brought in 10 wide receivers, which is just absurd. A handful of players from Ole Miss, and it wasn't just like some guys who wanted to follow Lane because they felt like that's kind of where they had to go. It's really good players. I mean, outside of Trinidad and Kejuan Lacey, really the best players from Ole Miss that we thought might leave with Lane did. Umamiyelan, Winston Watkins, TJ Daugherty, all those guys went. You obviously had the pair of quarterbacks in Sam Leavitt and Hussein Longstreet. So there's really no debate that Lane brought in the best transfer class because of the combination of quantity and quality. But with that, there's always the risk of how does it mesh together? 2023 Florida State, it worked perfectly. They just about went to the playoff, could have been a title contender, and then it all fell apart because the formula didn't keep working. Now, I do have a little more faith. I have a lot more faith in Lane than I do Mike Norvell, but that same sentiment still applies where if you go this heavy in the portal, you are kind of hanging yourself out to dry because what if it doesn't work? And with the over $40 million that is reportedly being invested in this roster by LSU this year, if he finds a way to not make the playoff this year, that's going to be an issue. He's not going to be fired, but that the noise is going to get really loud because we know how Lane is off the field, and that can be kind of I don't want to say charming, but your fan base will get behind that unless you're losing games. Then it gets annoying. Then you get turned on really quick. I'm not worried about that happening per se, but I do think that their ceiling is a little bit lower than most people believe because of my concerns with Sam Leavitt. But once again, just kind of a tease to what I'll be talking about the rest of the summer. But if you did enjoy this video and you want to see your team who I haven't quite gotten to yet in the SEC portal previews, subscribe to me here. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be doing that and purely SEC football coverage all summer long leading up to the season. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.